Welcome back to another NVIDIA episode. Today, we're going to take a closer look at a lot of recent news impacting the overall stock. There have been a lot of bullish sentiment. As we can see, the stock is up roughly 4% today. And we have price target analysts, we have new AI chips, but there's also some bearish sentiments or some bearish news that I want to share with investors. So let's take a closer look in today's episode.
I want to thank The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video, and check out fool.com/Jose for the 10 best stocks to buy now. With that link, you get a promotional offer for their subscription service. Now, let's continue with today's episode.
All right, so we can see Nvidia definitely had a great day. The stock is up roughly 4.76%. So I think today, if you've been following Nvidia, there were two big news that I want to say. The first one, if you've been a follower of this channel, it's not necessarily new news. So there is an exclusive report that Nvidia is preparing a version of its new flagship AI chip for the Chinese market, sources say. So if we take a closer look at that report, they're talking about AI chip meant for the Chinese market for the Blackwell architecture. So they're calling it the B20. And you guys are familiar that, hey, look, right now, the United States has a lot of regulations of sending the best AI chips to China. So Nvidia has to downgrade and kind of work with the government to be able to create a chip that they can send overseas and that meet the regulation rules. Right now, Nvidia has worked on the H20, which is a weaker down version of the H100 from their Hopper architecture. And we've heard from many places and a lot of reports going on that the H20 is actually seeing a nice amount of demand. So if you've been following this channel, for every architecture, I believe from here on out, you are gonna expect Nvidia to create a version of that chip for China. So for the Blackwell, there's gonna be the B20. And let me just say it now before this becomes exclusive in a year from now. When Nvidia releases the Rubin 100, the R100, let me tell you, there's most likely gonna be an R20 for that as well. So obviously right now, Nvidia understands that there's a lot of pressure from US regulators. So I would have to say that Nvidia is most likely working with these regulators to make sure that they're able to send the chips to China. Now, that doesn't guarantee that this is going to be a strong win for Nvidia, right? Because there's two plays here. The first play is, unfortunately, the US government, because of certain administration, because of just the change and the dynamics of administrations, you could have tighter rules that, hey, look, the H20 no longer meets the requirements. The future B20 may no longer meet the requirements. So there's always that added risk that these chips, while at the moment meet regulations, in the future, they might not. So based on the sources, the B20 is expected to start shipping out in the second quarter of 2025. I mentioned there were two issues with the AI chips for China. The first was the future risk of regulations becoming a little tighter. The second risk is Chinese customers focusing more on chips made in their domestic land or made in China and kind of eliminate the need of Nvidia. So right now from the H20, we understand that that's not the case. Nvidia's H20, even though it's super weak compared to the H100, is still doing some great numbers in China. And I believe that's going to be the case because Nvidia is way ahead of the competition in things of software stack, hardware stack. So I really wouldn't be worried about any competitions, especially in China, especially when we're taking a closer look at advanced AI chips. But for the chip market in China, I believe those are the two biggest risks that every investor should understand. Just because I don't think some of them are possible or because I believe the risk is low doesn't necessarily mean I'm right. That's why I still wanted to bring up the risk with you. Now, the second kind of big news that happened today is Piper Sandler increased their price target of Nvidia from 120 to 140. But before we go any further, guys, I do want to say thank you so much for the support on my ebook, this semiconductor handbook with over 50 plus semiconductor public companies, where I provide a great summary, where I provide some amazing FAQs so you understand what a lot of these companies in the semiconductor space do. The great thing is right now I am running a special offer, 33% off. You should see the product link down below. And thank you so much for the support. If you want to go to the website, moresemiinvesting.com. All right, so now let's jump back into this price target from Piper Sandler. We did see a nice increase to $140. And the main reason is this company or these groups of analysts are very excited for the upcoming Blackwell architecture. Again, if you are a follower of this channel, you guys know how bullish we are of the Blackwell architecture. So seeing all these analysts kind of running through and saying, hey, look, this is the reason they're updating price target, it just continues to give me evidence that we were right about this overall growth potential for Nvidia. So they believe that the B100, the B200 are going to outpace supply once they are introduced to the market. Let me just say, if this is something that we know already, Nvidia has mentioned it previously in their earnings call, that during the ramp up of the Blackwell, they're going to be supply constraint, not demand constraint. So again, if you have been following, I sound like a broken record here, but if you're following this channel, a lot of this is already old news to you. So if you are a new watcher, definitely subscribe, and I appreciate all the support. Now, outside of that strong demand for the Blackwell, this analyst does project that they can surpass revenue expectations for this upcoming quarter by about $2 billion in revenue due to the improvements of their overall networking supply chain. So we did get that bullish sentiment from Piper Sandler. Not only that, though, we also did get another bullish sentiment today. So Loop Capital raised their price target to 175 from their previous forecast of $120. 175 is one of those top range that we've seen. Obviously, we can see Loop Capital is very, very bullish on Nvidia. The main reason is Loop Capital is very, very bullish on the potential of data center revenue, but they believe Nvidia has the potential of data center revenue of $215 to $240 billion versus the street estimate of $145 billion. And they see earnings per share of $5.30 to $6 versus the street expectations of $3.76. So again, if this is based on this fiscal year, this is very bullish. Even for next fiscal year is very bullish. Now, outside of that, Loop Capital also believes that Nvidia has the potential to hit the 7 million data center GPU milestone in the fiscal year of 2026. If so, Nvidia stock may not be done with the overall growth. So if you are familiar, Nvidia right now creates these data center clusters for AI training. Currently, most data centers and AI training clusters are about 14, 16,000 clusters, 10 to 15, 10 to 16. So they're in the teens of thousands. We're also seeing them kind of go into like the 24,000 clusters as well. There's a few companies that have like 24,000 clusters. In these upcoming months, we're getting into the 100 cluster, where one supercomputer has over 100,000 GPUs. NVIDIA has mentioned that in the future, because of all their networking solution, they believe that they can hit the 1 million data center GPU cluster. And we can see this analyst here believes that that's the case, and it can happen in fiscal year of 2026. Which is actually calendar year of 2025. NVIDIA's fiscal year is roughly a year ahead. So I believe it is possible to hit that million GPU milestone. I don't necessarily believe it could happen. I'm not saying it's impossible to happen in 2025. I do believe it's very likely in calendar year of 2026. But that's something we should keep a closer eye on. Talking about huge superclusters, Elon Musk did mention that their XAI team is now powering on their 100,000 H100 GPU, and it is the most powerful AI training cluster in the world. So this AI training cluster, like I mentioned, this is the first 100,000 system that we have seen. There's most likely other players doing the same, but XAI is the first to do it if Elon Musk is not lying to us. Like I mentioned, most supercomputers right now in AI cluster for training are in that 24,000. So XAI, an AI company, there's plenty of AI companies, and I believe we're going to continue to see big customers purchase 100,000 GPUs for training computers. Now, I did mention that there was one bearish sentiment for NVIDIA. And this is something that I believe a few months ago I did. What are some of my biggest risks for NVIDIA? And this one hits it perfectly. I mentioned one of my biggest risks for NVIDIA is that Nvidia's upcoming GB200 and other new products need a lot of components. They need a lot of suppliers, and sometimes there might be an issue with the product because there's so many components, right? The risk of one product being defect has increased when you're working with thousands and thousands of components. And in my fear is that in one of these products, there's gonna be a defect and kind of create some form of bottleneck in the supply chain, and that bottleneck is gonna make it seem like there's a weakness in Nvidia demand, and that's gonna create a huge selling force or selling drive for Nvidia stock price, as everybody's going to say, hey, look, it's not this component that Nvidia missed revenue, is because there's no more demand for AI solutions. So I believe if we see any issues in the supply chain, the market will take it as a huge pocket of weakness in the AI market and can definitely create very volatile times. Now, there are reports that Nvidia's new GB200 AI server cabinets, which are liquid cooled, are leaking because one of the components was bad. Luckily, it is mentioned that these components were found very, very early, and they don't see any disturbance in the shipments for the future of the GB200. But again, it does give us that risk that, hey, look, what if in the future there might be another component failure that Nvidia couldn't really control? And like I mentioned, if that were to happen, it can definitely create some very strong weakness in the stock price for Nvidia. But if we do see that, in my opinion, those are going to be the times where everything is going to look super scary, and those are going to be the best buying opportunities for this AI giant. So those pocket of weakness is going to shake out a lot of weak hands if we do experience any of them. But that's probably one of my biggest risks is the supply chain with so many components. Something can go wrong, and if something goes wrong, it can obviously impact the overall outlook for the stock in the short term of things. So if we ever get to those, I'm obviously going to do a video. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Take care, have a good day, and see you all next time.